Hello, 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 and welcome to Miss Hope's Reading Hour. So glad to be with you all on this fabulous Friday. It's Friday. It's the end of the week. It's the end of school for the week. It is the end of work, hopefully for some of you, for the week. So, to this week, it's been pretty easy for me because we had half days all this week in Philadelphia during school. But it was 4 report card conferences. Oh, let me clear that up. It was a half day for students. So you all got to have the half day. Us adults did not. But we got to talk to all of your parents about the wonderful things that you've been doing this report period and singing your praises. So, we had to keep working the rest of the day, but it was enjoyable because we got to talk about all of you, our young ones. Okay? Well, I hope you have some plans for this weekend. Maybe it could be to see a friend, talk to a friend, have a little Zoom party, or just relax, take it easy. Whatever it is, I hope that you have fun doing it and you are starting off your weekend on this fabulous FRI-YAY. Oops, sorry, my glasses are slipping. On this fabulous FRI-YAY here with Miss Hope's Reading Hour. So I am glad that you all are here once again, and I will probably say it every day this month. Happy Black History Month to everybody. Why? Because Black history is everyone's history, okay? We can all learn something from each other. So I am open to all different cultures. I actually love learning about different cultures. Some of my older young ones may be able to relate to this. I was a PBS kid. So PBS here in Philadelphia is Channel 12. And they had on all types of things from all different countries, people who would show you how to travel to different places and stories about different countries and different times. And I still love that kind of stuff. I love learning about different peoples and foods and cultures. And I hope that with Miss Hope's Reading Hour, it sparks your imagination to want to learn about different places and different people and different cultures. Actually, that's really funny. This month in my class, our unit, everything that has to do with our unit is on cultures. Isn't that interesting? So hopefully this month you will be excited about learning about other cultures. I don't just think that only people who are African American are watching this reading hour. Hopefully it's people from all different walks of life, and that you will find out some very interesting things about African American culture and African culture. Because remember, we're not just going to talk about African American culture. We're going to talk about African culture as well, okay? So, my friends, let's get this disclaimer out of the way, right? The wonderful music that you hear and the wonderful books that we will read today, unfortunately, Miss Hope and Miss Hope's Reading Hour do not own the rights to it, but it is here for your listening and reading enjoyment, okay? Give me a second. Oh, I feel like my eyelashes keep hitting my lenses. So, how you like these new specs I got? I had on the pink and the silver ones before, and this is my other new pair of glasses. So glad I'm able to wear them while I'm reading with you all, because it helps me to read better, okay? Now, my friends, let us talk about the books that we are going to read today. So if you saw the teaser, I did put it up a little late. I'm sorry. But if you saw the teaser, today we're talking about learning new things or doing new things against all odds. So, can you learn something new or do something new even when you're up against obstacles? The obstacles can be big or they can be small, but can you persevere over those obstacles and achieve your goals no matter how young or old you are? We will see when we read our first two books. So let's get into what they are. Our first book, I actually wish that I had this book when I read another book that I read before. When I read this book, I'll tell you the other book that I was hoping that I had this book to read with it, because they're both kind of in the same area. Okay, but our first book is called Mr. George Baker. Oh, look up here. The reading rainbow symbol. Remember, I had bought a whole bunch of books that were books that had been read on Reading Rainbow. This is one of them. Mr. George Baker. This book is by Amy Hest, illustrated by John Muff. Mr. George Baker. And this is a Candlewick Press book. Mr. George Baker. And since we are in Black History Month, we're going to learn about a famous African American and something that he invented. Some of you may know who this person is. I don't know. But if you don't, you will learn about him today. This book is called The Unstoppable Garrett Morgan, Inventor, Entrepreneur, Hero. Ooh, it's shining a little bit on plastic. The Unstoppable Garrett Morgan, Inventor, Entrepreneur, and Hero. This book is by Joan DeChico, illustrated by Ebony Glenn. Now I have to look inside once we start reading to see who published this book. And of course, my friends, we are still working on finding out who stole New Year's Eve. So we didn't get a lot of clues the last time, but we got some little tidbits of clues. And well, I'll explain it when we get to it. I'll explain it when we get to it. Because see, you know how Miss Hope is about the mystery books. You know how she is, okay? So let us get to our first book, Mr. George Baker. All right. Okay, so I'm not hurting the book. Sometimes when you get a new book, especially when it's a paperback book, in order to see the pictures, you got to bend it back a little bit. And you have to make sure that the pages don't stick together. Mr. George Baker. See this man? This one here, sitting on the porch? That's Mr. George Baker. And he's 100 years old. No kidding. See him there sitting on the porch? Hurry up, Harry. Mr. Harry in charge. That's George, all snappy and happy in the morning. He always calls, "Hurry up, Harry," when I'm crossing lawns, his and mine. And he's always there first, waiting on the porch. Ooh, wrong way. See his pants? All baggy, baggy, baggy. What holds them up? Suspenders. Brown, baggy pants with 2 side pockets and 2 in the back. There's candy in those pockets. Little chocolate candies in twisty silver wrappers. George pops one in his mouth, and I do too. We wait on the porch and chew. Trying to make sure I get it in the frame, y'all. I really like his sweater, all hangy with 3 buttons. It's chilly in the morning, and we both hug our knees and wait. We wait, watching leaves blow off trees. They fly for a while. They float. They tumble for a while. They swoop. Now the screen door creaks, and you know who teeters out? Mrs. Baker, and some people say she's 90. Well, here you are, Harry, looking after my George. Mrs. Baker puts a sack on the step beside George, and there's lunch in the sack for later. For the man I love, says Mrs. Baker. Why, Mrs. B, you flatter me. George gets up, all crookedy and slow, and the next thing you know, they're dancing. Then Mrs. Baker gives a wave and a wink. Goodbye, she says. Be good, she says, and goes back in the house with the purple shutters. Isn't that sweet? At 190, still dancing together. George Baker and me, George Baker and I, we sit on the step and wait. Side by side, we wait. What are they waiting for, I wonder? They're just sitting on the step waiting. What are they waiting for? Let's find out. See these crookedy fingers going tappity on his knees? They fly across his knees. Tappity boom, tappity boom, tappity boom, boom, tap. George Baker is a drummer man, and some people say he's famous. Sometimes he drums on his porch at night, and the neighbors come by. Up the road and down the road, they come to hear my drummer man. Look at those fingers. Shh, listen. George gets up real slow. I take his hand and he takes mine, and we shuffle down the walk to the big school bus. Morning, says the driver. We've been waiting, answers George. There are 22 kids on the bus, plus 4 grown-ups on the bus. They all want George. Over here, they cry. Sit here, they say. But George sits with me each and every day. Wonder where the kids and the 4 adults are going. See this man? This one in room 7? That's Mr. George Baker. He's 100 years old, no kidding. He's learning to read with the grown-ups in room 7. And my room is right down the hall. I'm learning too. And it's hard. Wow. We can do it, says George after school. Our books are green and our books are green, and his lips sound out the letters real slow. But his fingers fly across his knees like a big old drum. Tappity boom, tappity boom, tappity boom, boom, tap. The end. Wow. Our subject today of learning and doing things against all odds. Can you imagine going through your whole life for 100 years and not knowing how to read? And he is the first one on that step, waiting so that he can go to school along with Harry to learn how to read. I'm not 100 years old, but I'm not a kid either. But I wonder if I would be embarrassed for people to know that I couldn't read if I couldn't read. I wonder if I'd have the same courage that Mr. George Baker had to go out and get on a bus with the little children and go to a school where children go to school just so he can learn how to read. That takes a lot of courage. And sometimes when you have to learn how to do something that you think is really hard, it takes courage. And it takes courage sometimes to say, I don't know. That's one thing that's really hard. And I run into that with my students. And I tell them, it's okay to say, I don't know. It doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong because you have the courage to say, I don't know. Can you teach me? And at 100 years old, he knows how to play the drums. He probably knows how to do a whole lot of things. Probably had a whole lot of jobs. But there was one goal that he hadn't reached, and that was learning how to read. There was another story that we had earlier this year about another 100-year-old woman, and that was a true story about her learning how to read for the first time when she was 100 years old. And she quit a few times, but then she kept going back because that was a goal that she wanted to reach. So, against all the odds she came up against, she still reached her goal. So let that be a lesson to you in the book about Mr. George Baker. Very good book. My teacher friends, if you have some students who are struggling with reading and they feel like, I just don't want to do this, it's really hard, and I don't ever think I'm going to get it, tell them the story of Mr. George Baker. It'll make them feel a lot better. And let them know if someone who is 100 years old, who moves really, really slow, can have the courage to still go and learn how to read, you can do it too. Very good book. Glad I got to read it with you all. All right, now to the unstoppable Garrett Morgan, inventor, entrepreneur, hero. Now the inventor part, yes. Entrepreneur part, yes. But I wonder how he was a hero. Let's see. So this book is a Lee and Low Books Incorporated book. Clang, clang, clang. Young George Morgan awoke to the sound of a ringing brass bell. He ran to the window and saw plumes of black smoke rising from the neighboring farm. He woke his younger brother Frank, grabbed the water buckets, and raced to help. These types of fires were common for sharecroppers like Garrett's parents. Their shacks were made of wood and tar paper that burned smoky, hot, and fast. If people were trapped inside, rescuers had nothing to protect themselves from poisonous smoke. By the time Garrett and Frank arrived, only a burned out shell of a house remained. As they walked back home, the gears in Garrett's clever mind turned, trying to think of a way to help. Wow. That had to be pretty scary. And only buckets of water to get to put the fire out. The son of freed slaves, Garrett was born in Claysville, Kentucky in 1877. The seventh of 11 children. Whoa, it's a lot of kids. As sharecroppers, the Morgans worked on land owned by a different family in exchange for a share of the crop at harvest time. After the cost of their housing, farm tools, and seed was subtracted from their share, they often found themselves in debt. Innovation became a way of life for Garrett. In his family, if his family needed something they didn't have, he figured out a way to make it himself. Wow, that's pretty awesome. I like making things too. By the age of 14, curious and creative Garrett was restless for a better life. Segregation was strictly enforced in the South, leaving few prospects for African Americans. Garrett went north to find greater opportunity. Garrett arrived in Cincinnati, Ohio, with pennies in his pocket. Having just a 6th grade education and few skills, he took the only job he was offered, as a handyman for a wealthy landowner. Although he worked long hours, Garrett never tired of learning. Each week, he set aside money for a private tutor and continued his studies. Wow, how industrious of Mr. Morgan. Four years later, Garrett moved further north, hoping to find a better job. Cleveland was becoming a major manufacturing center for the clothing industry. Throughout the garment district, workers used machines to make things that had once been crafted by hand. It was here, with modern machinery whizzing and whirling, ticking and clicking, that Garrett's creative nature soared. While working as a janitor for a clothing manufacturer, Garrett noticed that the drive belts on the sewing machines became slack after a while and often broke. Broken machines frustrated workers, whose pay depended upon the number of garments they produced. As he'd learned to do on the farm, Garrett solved the problem through his own innovation. He invented a simple but effective belt tightener that adjusted the slack and helped the machine run longer, smoother, and faster. Garrett's boss was so impressed by his creativity that he promoted Garrett to work as a repairman. That is pretty awesome. It wasn't long before word got around that Garrett could fix just about anything. A competing manufacturer offered him a job, and in 1906, Garrett became the company's first Black machinist. There, Garrett met a German seamstress named Mary Hassick. Mary was equally bright, creative, and hardworking. Garrett and Mary were instantly drawn to each other, but Black men were not permitted to talk to white female employees. Even a simple conversation with Mary brought a stern warning from Garrett's supervisor. But Garrett didn't give up. By now, he had overcome so many obstacles that he lived by a motto. If a man puts something to block your way, the first time you go around it, the second time you go over it, the third time you go through it. This way of thinking made Garrett unstoppable. To be with Mary, Garrett figured out a way to go around the obstacle. He quit his job and opened a sewing machine repair shop. Mary admired Garrett's boldness. In 1908, Garrett and Mary were married. Wow, that was pretty brave back in those days. With Mary's skill as an expert seamstress, Garrett expanded the business and began manufacturing affordable clothing for Cleveland's growing Black middle class. They named their business Morgan's Cut Rate Ladies Clothing. By 1909, they had 32 employees working on machinery built by Garrett himself. Good job, Garrett Morgan. Ding, 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 ding. A fire engine's bell rang out as a team of horses whizzed by. Their manes whipped in the wind like the flames racing through the building at the end of the block. The firefighters prepared to go in, holding their leather helmets in front of their faces to block the heat and smoke. Their efforts proved useless as they stumbled out, gasping for air. When Garrett heard about the tragedy, memories of the fire he had witnessed as a boy sparked to life. Though many years had passed, he realized that even big city firefighters lacked the equipment they needed to save victims. With the gears of his creative mind already turning, Garrett headed to his workshop, determined to find a way to help firefighters breathe in smoke-filled spaces. Garrett knew that smoke and deadly fumes rose with the heat of a fire, leaving a layer of fresh air near the ground. He needed to create a device that could capture this fresh air and lift it up for firefighters to breathe. He fashioned a heat-resistant canvas helmet with two long tubes attached, one for inhaling, lined with a wet sponge to cool and filter the air, and one for exhaling, with a valve to keep the stale air from getting back in. The tubes joined halfway down the wearer's back to become one tube dangling close to the ground in the layer of breathable air. Garrett spent 3 years crafting and refining his invention. His brother Frank helped him test the different helmets. After countless long nights falling asleep at his workbench, Garrett finally succeeded. He called his new invention the safety hood. Wow. In 1912, Garrett applied for a patent, which gives an inventor the sole right to make, use, and sell an invention. When his patent was granted, Garrett entered the safety hood in the 1914 International Exposition of Safety and Sanitation in New York City. Wearing his device for protection, Garrett entered a tent filled with smoldering sulfur, ammonia, and tar. Remaining there for more than 20 minutes. To the shock and amazement of the crowd, he emerged unharmed. The safety hood won the grand prize gold medal. Garrett traveled across the country, demonstrating the safety hood to fire departments. Many were impressed by the brilliant invention, but refused to consider the safety hood when they discovered Garrett was African American. Determined not to let prejudice stop him, Garrett called upon his motto and went over the obstacle this time. He asked a white friend to pretend to be him, while Garrett posed as his assistant modeling the hood. Some fire chiefs put the invention through their own rigorous tests, but the safety hood exceeded their expectations. Orders for Garrett's device flooded in. That was a smart, ingenious idea. You won't take it from me? Maybe you'll take it from my coworker. On July 25th, 1916, Garrett Morgan and his safety hood would face the greatest test of all. Ring, ring, ring. Garrett's telephone rang out in the middle of the night. An explosion had ripped through a tunnel at the Cleveland Waterworks, trapping workers in smoke and deadly fumes hundreds of feet below Lake Erie. One of the rescuers had seen Garrett's demonstration. Only the safety hood could save the men underground. With no time to waste, Garrett called Frank and raced for help. When Garrett arrived at the waterworks, he handed out protective hoods to the firefighters, police, and other volunteers, but the men refused to join him. 2 other rescue parties went down and have failed to return, Mayor Davis said. Garrett knew time was running out. I'll take a chance, he said. Frank stepped forward. I'll go with you. A man named Tom Clancy spoke up. My father is in there. I will go. Another man volunteered as well. True to his motto, Garrett Morgan went straight through the obstacle. As they descended into the tunnel, the faint light of dawn gave way to absolute darkness. While the rest of the men waited near the elevator, Garrett donned the safety hood and felt his way toward the iron door that led to the tunnel. Garrett had never tested his invention underground. He didn't know if the safety hood could withstand the compressed air pressure within the tunnel. He didn't know if it would keep him alive. There was only one way to find out. He turned the latch, opened the door, and stepped through. Whew. In the pitch blackness, man. Up on the surface, the crowd held its breath, waiting, hoping. Then, look, someone's coming out. It was Garrett Morgan with Tom Clancy's father. Moments later, Frank Morgan came out with another survivor. The crowd whooped and cheered. When Garrett and Frank prepared to go back in the tunnel, the crowd of volunteers grabbed safety hoods to join them. Whew, that had to be scary. The next day, the story of the rescued men was front page news. But Garrett and his brother were not. Found on the internet. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. That was my phone. I was not expecting that to happen. Anywho, the next day, the story of the rescued men was front page news, but Garrett and his brother were not given credit for their bravery. Oh man. Only the white volunteers were named and later awarded the Carnegie Medal for heroism. Many people had heard of Garrett's heroic actions and grew angry that he was excluded. Dozens of businessmen and elected officials wrote letters to the Carnegie Foundation, asking them to correct the injustice. When these efforts didn't work, the Citizens Committee, a self-appointed group of community leaders, came together to acknowledge Garrett's achievements and service to Cleveland. They held a ceremony and presented him with a solid gold, diamond-studded medal inscribed to Garrett A. Morgan, our most honored and bravest citizen. I guess he taught them how to overcome an obstacle too, huh? Garrett Morgan's desire to help people was a lifelong pursuit. If he saw a need for something, he used his ingenuity and resources to fill it. He continued to improve the safety hood, and in 1917, as the United States prepared to enter World War I, the safety hood was developed into the gas mask that saved thousands of American soldiers' lives. When Garrett and other Black businessmen were barred from advertising in white owners' newspapers, he started Call, a newspaper in which African Americans could promote their businesses and read fair-minded news about the Black community written by Black reporters. After Garrett witnessed a terrible collision between a horse-drawn carriage and a motor car at an intersection, he invented a more effective traffic signal. In addition to telling drivers to go and stop, his patented device also included a stop all position that stopped traffic in all directions, allowing cars and pedestrians traveling in one direction to clear the street before traffic traveling in the opposite direction began. Oh man, he was busy. A newspaper, a traffic signal, the gas mask. With determination and courage, Garrett Morgan went around, over, and through every obstacle between him and his goal to help others. Today, his legacy is all around us. Whenever firefighters rescue people from smoke-filled buildings or motorists and pedestrians safely cross an intersection, we have a brave inventor to thank, the unstoppable Garrett Morgan. Wow. The end. Man, oh man. Look at these pictures. So this is a picture of the original safety hood right here. Oh man, that is amazing. Oh, and this is Garrett Morgan rescuing Tom Clancy's father. Down there at the bottom, you see him with the safety hood on his back? Wow. Real history. Oh, look. And here is the original for the traffic signal with the all stop function. That is pretty amazing. And this is a picture of an older Garrett Morgan. Oh man, I'm so glad I got to read this story for you guys. And he's wearing the medal that he got for being the bravest citizen in Cleveland. Oh man, talk about overcoming obstacles. And all because he wanted to help people. So there was a time, there was a time and still sometimes now that African Americans and other people are barred from doing things that would really benefit everyone. But take the words of Mr. Garrett Morgan. I have to read that motto again. My parent teacher friends, you could put this motto up in your classroom. If a man puts something to block your way, the first time you go around it. The second time you go over it. And the third time you go through it. Now that's what I'm talking about. That's a motto that anybody can live by. I'm so glad I got to read The Unstoppable Garrett Morgan for you. So anytime you see some firefighters with their whole mask on, every time that you go through a traffic light or you're walking across the street, you can thank Mr. Garrett Morgan for that. Also, some of those newspapers that are run by African Americans, you can thank Mr. Garrett Morgan for that too. We have some here in Philadelphia, the Sun. Is that called West Philly Weekly? I'm not sure. I have to remember what the name of the paper in West Philly is. Why am I forgetting the other one? Like the really big one. The Tribune, the Philadelphia Tribune. All thanks to Mr. Garrett Morgan. There were some that came up with some papers before him. But what was interesting about his is that there were advertisements for African American businesses. And you can see that in the Tribune. You can see that in the Sun. And you can see it in the paper that's in West Philadelphia. So, kudos, a round of applause for Mr. Garrett Morgan. Man, so glad I got to read that book for you all. Can't wait to find more like that. And because Mr. Garrett Morgan, he's not one of those African American historical figures or heroes that you hear about a lot. We always hear about Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass and Rosa Parks, but there are so many more African American and African people who have done awesome things to help others and to make our world a better place. Can't wait to introduce you to some of them as we go through Black History Month. And know this, you'll get introduced to some of them even after Black History Month, because Black history is all year round. Okay? Now, my friends, here we are with Who Stole New Year's Eve? So, Miss Martha Freeman, okay, always leaving us with more clues and questions. So we are in chapter 19. We went through chapter 17 and 18, okay? And we learned that Coach Hathaway and Coach Banner are looking to invest in gasoline. Like, okay, that's interesting. Now, Coach Hathaway is the baseball coach. And so he's like, listen, I heard that Coach Banner was going to invest in gasoline. And it makes sense for the baseball team, the baseball league, to get in with him, because on the baseball field, there's a whole lot of grass and that could equal money for our teams. Okay. So he's looking to invest in gasoline. Now, Alex and his friends, they are handing out the flyers for the pet costume party, and also asking questions about what people heard, if they heard anything or saw anything the day that all of the ice sculptures for the ice carnival went missing. So while he's down and goes to talk to the newspaper guy, he goes to look for some clues. He found some chewed up sunflower seeds. Then he asked Coach Hathaway, "Do you know anybody who likes sunflower seeds?" He was like, "Well, me, duh. You've been in the baseball league all this time. You know I like them." And Coach Hathaway has a pickup truck. He likes sunflower seeds. He's like, "Well, I mean, I could be a suspect." But sometimes people will say things like that to get you off their trail. So, does Coach Hathaway have anything to do with it? I don't know. We will find out if there are any more clues, or if we will find anything that will give us a clue to who did it. Now, remember, we're still trying to find out who this mystery professor is that's giving the police department these tips about things that they're afraid that will explode in College Springs. Got to find out who that is. And of course, who stole Ice Eve and all of the other ice sculptures. And unfortunately, because Yasmin is not around, she's a little bit of a suspect, but she doesn't have the means. She may have the motive. She doesn't have the means. So let's find out what else is going on and who stole New Year's Eve. Chapter 19. Jeremiah was frowning when he opened the front door. This was not a surprise. But was I crazy? Oh, yeah, that's right. And Yasmin borrowed Luau, Alex's cat. What did she borrow Luau for? Let's get back to the story. Jeremiah was frowning when he opened the front door. This was not a surprise. But was I crazy? Or did he look even more sorrowful than usual? "Hey, bud, how you doing?" I said. "Is Yasmin home?" Jeremiah nodded. "It's bad." "What's bad?" "The la la la," he said. "Listen." We were quiet for a second, and from somewhere at the back of the house, I heard the sound of a piano, and with it a voice singing what was probably supposed to be the scales, but sounded more like off-key yodeling. I winced. "That's how she practices?" Jeremiah nodded. "For hours. I'm not sure I can stand it much longer." Then he brightened. "But she can't practice while she's talking to you, right?" "Come on in. Stay a while. I can make you a peanut butter sandwich with any kind of jelly or jam you want." "I can't stay," I said, "but I do need to talk to her." Jeremiah said, "Wait right here. I'll get her." Then he disappeared. The Pops were neat and tidy people, but this time of year their front hall was cluttered with everybody else's, with their coats, scarves hanging from hooks, gloves, and snow boots. I tried to stay on the mat by the door so I wouldn't track melted snow inside, but there were already puddles on the floor by Yasmin's boots. As an experienced detective, I knew those puddles meant she had been outside recently. Otherwise, the water would have dried up in the warm house. Also, she must not have stayed on the sidewalk when she was outside. The sidewalk was mostly dry. At some point, she'd been walking in somebody's yard or another place where there was still some snow. But where had she gone? And had she taken Luau with her? I took a quick look around to make sure no one was watching, then bent down to examine one of Yasmin's snow boots. On the sole were a layer of melting snow, a few salt crystals, mud, blades of grass, and a tiny clump of something else. Something gray brown like sawdust. Sunflower husks. Alex, what are you doing? Yasmin had come into the hall. As I stood up, I felt myself blush. Oh, hi. How's the practicing coming? Yasmin opened her mouth to answer, but at the same time, her mom appeared in the hall behind her. Alex, it's so nice to see you, she said. Won't you come in for a minute? We have a guest who would like to meet you. Uh, okay, I said, thinking this was pretty weird. But I have a meeting I have to go to, so I can only say hi. I slipped off my snow boots and left them by the door. Then I followed Yasmin and Mrs. Pop. The Pop's living room is all cream colored. The walls, the sofa, and the carpet. Every time I go in there, I'm terrified I'll leave a smudge. Sitting on a cream-colored chair by the fireplace was the bearded man from the Jensen's disaster party. I remembered his name at the same time he stood and introduced himself. Professor Enzo Olivo. I said, very nice to meet you, Professor, and tried to think what I knew about him. He had the fight with Professor Henry at the party. Plus, he was the petroleum guy quoted in Tim Roberts' story about gasoline, the guy who didn't believe gasoline would ever work. In fact, I believe we've met before, Professor Olivo was saying. But you were only a very small boy. We got to know Dr. Olivo at church shortly after we moved here from Trinidad, Mrs. Pop said. We've been friends all this time. It's nice to see you again, I said, but, well, I have this meeting I have to go to now, and actually, Alex, Professor Olivo said, there was something in particular I wanted to say to you. This was getting weird. What could Professor Olivo possibly have to say to me? Okay, go ahead. It's a bit awkward, said Professor Olivo. The thing is, I was hoping you could ask your mother, Professor Parakeet, to meet with me. At least it wasn't me he was interested in. Sure, I said. No problem. But you could ask her yourself. She works at the police department. The number is 235-1952. Professor Olivo finished my sentence for me. I know it very well. And in fact, we have even had one meeting. But for some reason, she seems to be reluctant to meet again. And it is quite important. I said, oh, okay. Then I'll deliver your message. That's what I said. But at the same time, I knew if my mom didn't want to talk to someone, no message from me could change that. In fact, he must really have been bugging her. I mean, who knows the police department number by heart? Only someone who calls all the time. And wait a minute. For the next few seconds, I must have stood there frozen like an idiot, because finally Mrs. Pop's voice interrupted my thoughts. Alex, Professor Olivo said thank you. Professor Olivo's face came back into focus. He looked puzzled. What? I said. Oh, I'm sorry. You're welcome. And now I looked over at Mrs. Pop. I hope you don't mind, but like I said, I've got to get going. 5 seconds later, I had said goodbye and was in the front hall stepping into my boots. Yasmin was right behind me. So, Alex, what was it you came over for? Since by then I was really late, there was no time for what Sophie would call chit-chat. Where did you take my cat? Who says I took him anywhere? She said. My dad, I said. Yasmin backed down. Okay. And how come you're in such a hurry? I'm going over to Sophie's. We're detecting. I think we're just about to crack the case. This was a total exaggeration, but I was irritated. So I guess the new girl's detecting with you? Yasmin said. Yeah, she is. And she has a name, Eve. Yasmin frowned. So ask Luau if you want to know where we went. Or don't you talk to your cats anymore? I finished velcroing my boots and got to my feet. He said to ask you. Yasmin rolled her eyes. Oh, please, Alex. This talking to your cat thing was cute when you were little. But you're a big boy now. Isn't it time to grow up? Chapter 20. That last comment, as my mom would say, was uncalled for, and I left the Pop's house without either getting an answer or saying goodbye to Yasmin. All down the front walk, I was thinking she would yell after me to apologize, but she didn't. There was one good thing. I hadn't had to explain why I was examining her snow boot. What were sunflower husks doing on the sole anyway? I had seen the other sunflower crud downtown, but Yasmin and Luau wouldn't have had time to go downtown. At Sophie's house, her mom answered the door. Mrs. Sakura is tall and wears pink lipsticks, sparkly rings on every finger, and pink nail polish. She's always going to either the spa or the salon. Like Sophie, she talks a lot. Also like Sophie, she's not as dumb as you think she is at first. Alex, sweetheart, nice to see you. Did you have a good holiday? I don't think I've seen you since the disaster party at the Jensens. Hi, Mrs. Sakura. I did have a nice holiday, thank you. How was your holiday? Mrs. Sakura waved me inside and led me downstairs to the family room, all the time describing her Christmas with emphasis on presents. It was like listening to one of those shopping shows you see while you're flipping through channels. Mom! Sophie was sitting on a plaid sofa with Eve. You're talking his ear off. Mrs. Sakura had plenty of practice ignoring her daughter. Now she winked at me and Eve before heading back upstairs. Let me know if you need anything. I was planning to tell Sophie she ought to be nicer to her mom. But first, there was something else I wanted to say. See, for once, I was kind of proud of myself. I had figured out who Mom and Mrs. Price's persistent tipster was. Professor Olivo. Okay, friends, we will end there. So, the crazy professor that keeps calling in with the tips is Professor Enzo Olivo. And what are the tips that he's sending? That's the one thing that his mom did not say. There was something about things exploding, but we don't know for sure what the tips were. And we still do not know why Yasmin had Luau. Could she be detecting by herself? Or could she have a little something to do with the disappearance of the ice sculptures? I don't know. See, more questions, less answers. More clues, not enough answers. Well, my friends, we are at the end. I went a little over because, I get a little overzealous with the mystery books. But we will come back to it. Oh boy. Almost dropped my computer. We will get back to it on our Marvelous Monday with more about African American and African history. And we will have some books about love because this is the love month. Of course, love is all year round too. Until then, my friends, thank you so much for being on Miss Hope's Reading Hour with me today. And I look forward to seeing you on our Marvelous Monday. Until next time, my friends, I will